Have you ever heard of a company making their product dumber to make it a runaway success? I know, it sounds completely backward, but that is exactly what happened with this first-generation air purifier. Today, we're going to dig into the amazing story of how removing its single most important feature, the air quality sensor, was actually the smartest decision they could have possibly made.
So to really get to the heart of this, let's imagine we're a fly on the wall during a pretty tense meeting between two key people. The product's systems architect, who came up with this crazy idea, and the reliability engineer who, as you can probably guess, was not sold on it at all. The conversation really kicked off with the engineer laying out his case against the whole thing.
You can just picture him, shaking his head. Look, I've been over this, and I still don't get it. We're an engineering-first company. Pulling the air quality sensor, it feels like we're intentionally shipping a broken product. That sensor is the whole smart part of the device. Why on earth are we taking such a massive step backward? But the architect, he was ready. He came with the data. He probably said something like, I totally get the hesitation, but this decision wasn't a gut feeling. It was driven by what we were seeing in the real world. Now have a look at this. If you add up our top failure modes, sensor drift, contamination, humidity, all of those sensor-related problems account for a whopping 83% of all product failures and returns. The sensor wasn't the core feature, it was the core problem.
He went on, and you have to understand this wasn't about us using a cheap component. It was about a fundamental mismatch with the environment. In our target market in India, the sheer amount of dust was clogging the sensor's optics almost 4 times faster than our lab test ever predicted. Then you have the crazy humidity causing condensation and unstable power grids literally frying the circuits. The sensor was just completely unreliable where it mattered most.
The engineer, seeing the data, started to get it, but he was still skeptical about the real motive. He pushed back. Okay, fine, but let's be real. This was really about cutting costs, wasn't it? Just a way to hit some aggressive price target. And the architect, he didn't even try to deny it. You're not wrong, cost was absolutely a critical piece of the puzzle. Look at this number. Removing the entire sensor system saved us 3,870 rupees on every single unit. And that's not just the cost of the sensor chip itself, the architect would have added. That number represents a staggering 91% cost reduction for the entire subsystem. That's the support circuits, the power regulation, the extra time for calibration on the assembly line, everything. The hard truth is, this was the only way we could make the product affordable for the people we were trying to help.
The engineer had to admit the financial argument was pretty undeniable. But he brought the conversation right back to his original point. Okay, I can't argue with those savings. They're huge. But what do we lose in performance to get that price? An air purifier that can't actually sense the quality of the air? Well, it still feels broken to me.
And that's when the architect probably leaned in with a smile. And that, he'd say, is the most elegant part of this whole thing. We didn't just remove the intelligence, we replaced it. We swapped that fragile, failure-prone piece of hardware for a much more robust and sophisticated piece of software, a time-based algorithm. He then broke down the logic. You see, instead of reacting to pollution after it's already there, we started predicting it based on human behavior. We figured out there are 2 peak times for activity in a home. Morning, between 6 and 9 a.m. when everyone's getting ready, and evening, 6 to 9 p.m. when they're all coming home. During those windows, the purifier automatically kicks into a 15-minute boost mode to clear out all the dust that gets kicked up. Then, it just fades back into its quiet, low-power maintenance mode. The engineer had to admit it was a clever workaround. Okay, but a simple timer, he'd ask, does a timer really work as well as a real-time particle sensor that can react instantly to, someone burning toast? From an engineering standpoint, and for the customer, that's the only question that matters. That was the exact question we had to answer before we could move forward, the architect replied, pulling up the field data. So, in our 30-day real-world tests, the original sensor-based model achieved a 96.2% reduction in the air quality index. Pretty good. And our new sensorless model? It hit 94.7%. The performance in everyday use was virtually identical. But here's the kicker, he continued. The sensorless model was actually more reliable for the user. Its mean time between interventions, basically how long it could run before the user had to mess with it, was 78 days. The fancy sensor model only made it 62 days before someone had to clean the sensor or reset it. By removing the main point of failure, we actually made a product that worked better, for longer, without any hassle. The engineer was pretty much sold on the tech by now, but he shifted his focus. Okay, the engineering is solid, and it's more reliable, I get it. But you took away the one thing the user looks for, that number on the screen.
People want to see the AQI number go down. They're not going to trust a black box that just turns on and off by itself.
That's exactly what we thought too, the architect admitted. But our consumer research told us a completely different story. And honestly, this was the single most important thing we learned. A massive 91% of our target users told us they cared way more about seeing visible dust on the filter than they ever did about a number on a display.
And the problem was actually deeper than that, he explained. 86% of people we talked to already believed the AQI numbers on affordable devices were fake or inaccurate anyway. For them, the real proof, the real trust came from pulling out a disgusting, dirty filter after a couple of weeks. If they didn't see that physical evidence, they'd stop using the product, no matter what the little number on the screen said. The sensor was actually making them more skeptical, not less.
And at that point, the engineer was finally all in. Wow, that's incredible, he'd say. So it's more reliable, just as effective, cheaper to build, and it actually aligns better with what users trust. That's a home run. Were there any other upsides for the business?
Oh, was there ever, the architect said. This is where the decision went from being a smart product choice to a massive strategic victory for the whole company. By removing the sensor, we totally changed our regulatory path. See, a device that measures air quality has to go through tons of expensive, time-consuming government testing. But a device that simply cleans the air on a schedule, that's a much simpler and faster process.
When you add it all up, he continued, that simplified certification process cut our time to market by 111 days. We launched almost 4 months ahead of schedule, all because we took one component out.
And on top of that, we cut our direct certification costs by 73%. It was a gigantic win that saved us time and a ton of money. So yeah, removing the sensor wasn't a compromise, it was an accelerator.
So what can we take away from that conversation? The decision to pull the sensor was never about making the product dumber. It was not completely redefining what smart meant for this specific market and for this specific user. It was a true masterclass in addition by subtraction.
When you look at the final scorecard, the sensorless design won on every single front that actually mattered. It was more reliable because they cut out the biggest reason for failures. It was way more affordable, which made it accessible. It created a better user experience by focusing on the tangible proof of a dirty filter, which is what people actually trusted. And it got the product on shelves almost 4 months faster.
And that really leaves us with a challenging question to think about. We're so often focused on what features we can add to a product, but sometimes the biggest innovation comes from what you dare to take away. So think about it. In your work, on your projects, what essential feature might actually be the very thing that's holding you back?